email with the link to the recording will be shared post-event. We will also have a Q&A session at the end of the discussion, so please enter any questions that you have using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible polling questions or questions that you have. Your participation is important for us today, as we will have 4 polling questions, and we encourage your engagement throughout. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our incredible panel. Debbie Toole is Vice President of Human Resources with Northview Canadian High Yield Residential Fund, where she is responsible for the development and implementation of people strategy, with accountability for all components of human resources, including recruitment, performance management, employee development, and employee engagement. Debbie's experience includes leadership in driving strategic change in organizations and developing innovative HR strategies to support business needs. She has over 15 years of experience as human resources executive in several industries. Welcome, Debbie. Next is Sherry Dallamont. She is the Director of Human Resources at EFW Radiology in Calgary, Alberta. As an accomplished human resources professional and trusted advisors with over 20 years of hands-on experience in both unionized and non-unionized environments, Sherry has worked in a variety of industries, including airline operations, marketing, banking, engineering, construction, and healthcare. We are pleased to have you join us, Sherry, so welcome. Next, we have Robin Farr. Robin is the Director of People and Culture at Travel Alberta. Robin is known for her passion for organizational culture and her focus on the employee experience. Prior to her role at Travel Alberta, Robin worked at WestJet, as well as several public sector organizations in BC in both HR and communications. Welcome, Robin. Next, we have Evelyn Spolstra, who is the Manager of HR Business Partners and Advisory Services at Pembina Pipeline in Calgary, Alberta. With more than 23 years of experience in human resources, Evelyn started her career in the recruitment service industry in the Netherlands. In 2000, she immigrated to Canada, where she worked in progressive roles in the HR field for various oil and gas upstream companies before joining Equinor as Manager of Human Resources in Canada. In her last year with Equinor, she led the global recruitment and attraction team in their corporate headquarters in Norway before relocating back to Canada. Evelyn has built a solid reputation by enabling business success through smart people strategies during tumultuous times, and strongly believes in the power of collaboration. We're happy to have you with us today, Evelyn. I am thrilled to have such an esteemed guest, and I'm looking forward to talking with all of them today. So we are kicking off today's session by exploring how 2020 forever changed the role of HR and their key priorities for supporting organizations. So let's begin with a question for our audience on how you feel 2020 changed the role of HR. The question is, how has the HR role been elevated as a result of the pandemic? You should see the question and 5 options on your screen. So please choose the best answer that supports your experience. And I'll give everybody a few seconds to go ahead and do that. I think that we can all agree that HR has been increasingly involved in making many of the changes within organizations over the past year. We'll just give everybody a few more minutes, more seconds, I guess. And there we go. Well, surprisingly, all of the above is the popular answer. So it sounds like HR has been exceptionally busy over the last year. And I think we can certainly all agree on that. So we're going to move to our panelists and hear from our panelists. And so I'm going to start with you, Robin. Which major changes did HR experience in 2020 in your experience, and how have those changes benefited the HR role?
Well, I would say that I hope what has happened is that circumstances over the last few months have allowed us to step back from some of the day-to-day things in the organization and the focus on the tactical and look at how we can more broadly serve the organization. So many of us are with organizations that had to suddenly manage a remote workforce, and that has brought some very specific challenges. We've changed how we work and how we connect on a daily basis. We've introduced new technology that many people have had to get used to, associated things like Zoom fatigue and managing issues like having a cat filter on and not being able to get it off. I'm glad that happened to a lawyer and not to me. We've had questions around performance management. We've had new challenges around employees' health and well-being. And we've had some specific challenges from working at home with other family members, children, pets present. So for my part, I'm actually not sure that I'm totally convinced that it has forever changed HR, or at least I don't really think we should blindly make that assumption. I do believe that it's human nature to go back to what we were doing before. So we have to be cognizant of that and really deliberate about how we manage it. Having said that, I think that this situation has lasted so much longer than any of us have anticipated. I actually remember a couple of months ago joking with one of our VPs about how she wore her best work clothes to work on the last day that we were in the office because she wasn't going to get to wear them again for 2 weeks. And here we are now almost a year later. So we've gone from the early sort of overly optimistic days in April, May, June of last year, where we were talking about going back to work and how we would reopen traditional office spaces. And now we're looking at new ways to work. And some companies did that really swiftly early on and moving to 100% remote work and getting rid of their office space. And if anybody participating has had that experience, I would love to know how that change was managed. But at this stage of the game, I think most of us are talking about a hybrid approach to work or what a new workplace will actually look like. I'm thrilled to see that, though I think it's too bad that it took a global pandemic for us to get to that point and to be able to think more flexibly about what work looks like. I always like to use the lens that work is something we do, not somewhere we go. So into 2021 and beyond, I think we have an opportunity to think about the workplace differently. Maybe more people do work from home on a regular basis. Some may do a hybrid. We've just started talking about this at Travel Alberta about using our office space differently. Talking about the office not being a place, the office is not the work, the office is a tool. So maybe we set it up differently to facilitate collaborative work as opposed to the sort of focus on individual offices and workstations that we've traditionally had. And then lastly, I think at the same time, if we're looking at supporting ongoing remote work and flexibility, I think we need to understand that when everyone is working from home, if that's something that applies to your organization, that's actually an easier model to manage than a hybrid. And if we end up with a hybrid, we need to identify the different issues that come up. That's everything from communication to performance management. And this is another case where that really important lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion is really, really important.
Yeah, some great points, Robin. And certainly I think we can all attest to the Zoom or the Teams fatigue, whatever platform you use, and also getting stuck with a background that you didn't intend to have for a meeting. I think we've all been there. So thank you for your insight. Sherry, I'm going to pass it over to you next. Oh, I think you're on mute, Sherry. Oh, we're still not hearing you, Sherry.
No, what's happening?
Can you hear me? I think we're hearing you now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great, perfect, thanks. I was saying, I really like this question. A lot of people are asking this, and we're going to be asking this for a really long time. COVID has become the accelerator for one of the greatest workplace transformations of our lifetime, in my opinion. Let's be honest, from an employee perspective, what didn't we all experience? This truly is HR's moment to lead organizations in navigating the future. What I really like is that we have a tremendous opportunity, and I feel a responsibility to provide leaders and employees with guidance on skills and capabilities they need to be successful over the years ahead as roles and workplaces adjust and develop, as Robin said. Things are always going to be changing. We know that. But to survive, businesses, with HR's help, must adapt to the future of work and what that looks like. And I feel HR's got a valuable role to play in optimizing that change. Now, the ability to move with speed and agility is a critical capability that HR can directly influence. We're arguably in the best position to see overall organizational processes and offer a viewpoint that does a number of things, like supports the coordination of changes and the transitions between those changes, communication and collaboration across business units and functions. When it all comes down to it, how to support the well-being of our employees is paramount now and in the future. Employees and their families are more of a package deal for us more than ever before, and we need to consider employees in a more holistic way. Now, saying that, HR professionals have had to update their strategies to engage employees and understand what they expect and value in their employment, and that is no easy task and will take a very long time to get a handle on. And we must consider the development of programs and supports for the existing workplace, paying careful attention to potential changes to future workplace settings, as Robin mentioned before.
Thanks, Sherry. I love that the employees and their families are a package deal. I love that phrase, and certainly love that you're taking that approach. I'm going to move on to Debbie. Debbie, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. Absolutely, this is a great question and quite timely. We're all looking at this, and we're heading into some planning work in our company. So I've been also, trying to do some research on where HR is going. And overall, I think 2020 is an opportunity for HR to show strategic leadership, significant strategic leadership in helping their organizations navigate key business and organizational changes. It was a year where a lot of organizations had to focus on their people more, allowing HR to definitely take the lead in that strategy, which also helped with our overall goal of partnering with the business. One quick stat that I uncovered from doing some research around this that came from McLean and Company is that when HR is truly a partner in the organization, organizations are 1.7 times more likely to be highly effective at quickly changing to capitalize on new ideas. So again, this, 2020 was a crazy year, but it was an opportunity to really move forward in that role. For our company, last year was particularly challenging. We had the pandemic, but we were also working through a transaction. We received an offer to buy our company a year ago, actually, from now. So, so the pending sale took 10 months to work through. So through that time, employees were, again, dealing with the pandemic, but also uncertain as to whether they had a future role and what that role would be in the organization. So, through all these difficult situations, it's an opportunity. And HR was able to provide leadership in the organization's corporate response, both to COVID and the transaction. So with COVID, we built and implemented strategies to support the leaders with change. We led all the communications strategy for both the transaction and the pandemic. And overall worked on helping to establish a culture of more sensitive leadership. We built policies for employees. We drove a focus on mental health. We also had some leadership training supporting all this. And also HR was able to lead the return to work initiative, which was critical. And so in the summer, we brought employees in our corporate head office back on shifts basis, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And then, in Calgary, obviously we sent those corporate employees home again in December, but lots of leadership opportunity there. Thank you.
Mhm. Lots of great points. And Debbie, I'm not going to complain about what we went through, considering that you not only had to go through manage through the pandemic, but also your company being purchased and all of the challenges that go along with that. So I tip my hat to you. Evelyn, I'm going to go to you next.
Well, most of the topics have been shared, of course, but with Pembina, it was an interesting time. Not only did we really have to focus virtually, I think that was the biggest challenge. And they looked at HR on how you can best manage virtual teams. Pembina was a very old-fashioned company where it was really about the connections you make, the collaboration in person. So when we were forced into the 21st century in a real fast way, they were really struggling initially on how to handle this efficiently. All the things above, though, productivity, diversity, and inclusion. How do you collaborate remotely? How do you get the best efforts out of your teams? How do you not micromanage? How do you ensure that you still can get your task delivered after the dust settled? It was quite a challenging way. HR really stepped up to the plate. I still feel we're in transition. We used to be a very reactive part of the function, to be honest. I think it was more about the business making decisions. 2020 actually put HR on the foreground, and they really listened to the opportunities on how to be actually more efficient. We didn't have a purchase, but we actually had a reorganization mid through 2020 where everything had to be done virtually. So it actually really increased that focus on how do you do this? How do you keep this efficiently? While for the surviving teams, how do you ensure that they feel motivated, feel engaged, while not actually seeing them face to face? So I think that really was the key challenge for our organization. The diversity piece, I bring it up because it actually instantly also allowed us to force ourselves to be more flexible. How do you deal with single parents that have no other choice but to drive the kids to school? How do you deal with the families that now are homeschooling? How do you ensure that people are not emailing in the middle of the night and expectations on how you can actually work efficiently as a team and not frustrate the heck out of everyone? So all of that, I would say, it's been a very interesting year. And the key priorities for me is it is an ongoing focus on organizational effectiveness, and HR in our team is really stepping up to the plate on providing that guidance and ensuring that our employees are thriving in this new setup. And I just wanted to comment on Robin and Cherry before I close off. Is the hybrid, I would say, is probably the most challenging setup. It's easy to have 100% working from home. It was easy to have 100% working in the office. The hybrid is the most challenging. So it's going to be interesting months before we go back to a new normal.
Yeah, I definitely hearing lots of that, where it is going to be challenging to manage that hybrid solution if that's what you move forward with. And I think certainly, Evelyn, and many organizations that weren't, like you said, progressive and where they, the work situations probably experience significantly more challenges to adjust to that working from home. So thank you, all of you, for your great insights. So we're going to go to our next polling question. So let's gain some perspective from our audience about the major changes and challenges that HR is faced with today. And so you'll see the polling question, and there are 5 selections there: retention, ability to support employee mental health and wellness, remote workforce and hybrid solutions, and workforce planning and culture. I'm sure we could have had a really long list here. And certainly thank you, all of you, for participating, as it certainly adds a bit more of a perspective to what we are covering here today. So we'll just give it a few moments. I almost feel like this is a little bit of a game show. Get to answer. And here's our answers. So we see, well, there's 3 answers here that seem to be tied at 27% ability to support employee mental health and wellness. Certainly a big topic today. Remote workforce and hybrid solutions, as we talked about, some of the bigger challenges that we're going to be faced with, and certainly culture. How do we manage culture as as we're working from home or in a hybrid solution? So definitely some interesting topics there. So I'm going to move to our panel, and I'm going to start with you, Debbie. And so what do you feel are the main issues currently being faced by HR, and how are they being addressed?
Thanks, Trina. I think this is a great question as a segue for our last one. Overall, I think the main issues for HR, again, and opportunities, but I think there's been a great shift in organizations in terms of balancing employee needs and organizational needs. And HR is at the forefront of leading that. So again, in a little bit of research I was doing, I uncovered that research shows that the overall employee experience improves when that balance is skewed towards the employee needs. So we can use our experience with COVID going forward, I think, as a leverage to help continue that shift in balance. So in particular, the research showed that there are 4 key things that benefit from this shift. One is we get improved workforce productivity, improved organizational performance, the ability to change quickly, and innovation. So all those things improve. Another key factor, I think, in 2021 is in general, I think budgets will be tighter in most companies. And I know they are certainly in ours as a result of going through the transaction and also going through COVID. There's less revenue. Layoffs have happened in a lot of companies. And so HR has less resources. So how can we do more and be more innovative? And again, I think another key factor that we've mentioned, and we'll talk about some more, is the movement to, and for a lot of organizations, a hybrid work environment. And in particular, that's what we're thinking of. And as we incorporated that in the summer, it was a bit like a trial guinea pig timeframe. It's very challenging. It's very challenging for managers. They got employees here, employees there. And culturally, it drives some interesting challenges. So moving on a bit, our unique challenges, I think, given all that, within our company, about 2/3 of the employees are frontline workers. We're basically a REIT and a multifamily REIT and a property management firm. So the bulk of the employees are cleaners and maintenance, and they're working in the buildings with the tenants. So they have not been working remotely, but the corporate staff has. So culturally, we'll have to deal with, how differently do we treat our corporate staff from our frontline staff that is not working remotely and is face-to-face with our customers. So our focus going forward will be on rebuilding our culture, again, after COVID and after the transaction, aligning employees to our corporate strategy, new corporate strategy, and re-energizing the workforce. We find that, again, with COVID and the transaction, it's been very stressful. And so we're entering a year where there's a fair bit of burnout, I think. And then in particular, to address that, we will have an ongoing focus on mental health. We'll continue that. Some areas in particular I thought of addressing, broken down into the executives and managers and employees. So with our executives, there's a few things we'll be doing as part of our strategic planning coming up. We'll be looking at, again, focusing on revising our culture and being clear about how we want to be and show up going forward. So as part of that, we want to keep the positive aspects of our prior company, again, before we were sold, but also it's an opportunity to determine what should change, what should add on, where some good ideas from here. We'll also be developing a new type of scorecard to measure our organization's effectiveness, and along with that, a new performance management process to link employees' efforts to our scorecard. We'll be spending time identifying what our employee value proposition is. So what's special about us for our current employees and for attracting new employees, and it all links to the culture, of course. And then also look at any changes to leadership style. So it's an opportunity to look at ourselves. And then with managers, as we mentioned before, some HR will be providing some support for managers in 4 key areas. One is help them identify some mental health challenges in the workplace and what to do about it. So that's not easy. Provide support for them on how to build teams remotely. And again, particularly as we're probably heading into hybrid, we haven't closed on that yet. It's how do you do team building when half are here, half are there? How do you even conduct the best meetings when not everybody's in a room? In addition, with our frontline managers who are working with employees, dealing directly with our tenants, and throughout COVID, some hands-on leadership training for them. And then in the overall employee group, we'll be looking at engaging new hires, particularly in a remote onboarding program. And given our focus on mental health, we did enhance our mental health provisions with our EFAP and our benefits renewal program. And then we want to continue ongoing regular communication between HR, the CEO. So lots on our plate. Our trick will be prioritizing and being innovative about it in a different working environment. Thank you.
So no shortage of challenges to be addressed for sure. Sherry, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure, thanks. For us, for all of us really, the COVID pandemic's fundamentally changed how we all do business. It's forced us here, especially to re-examine our assumptions that we had about how our physical workplace was. We run clinics. We do have shared office space as well for our executive and our shared resources that sit on this floor where I am now. As you can see, I'm in the office. We've had to become more flexible. We had no choice. We have to run clinics. We have to support our communities in which we serve our patients, and we want to be able to provide excellent healthcare to the communities where we live. Yet, how do we balance that against, can our people go home? Can our people stay here? Many of us thought that work from home options weren't options for our organization. We were wrong. We took a look at some of the roles, and some of them we could start making transitions to send home, like our booking group. We sent half of them home. The IT group went and took them and got them all set up, and they're working fine from home. And so the hybrid, I think that we've talked about a lot, is very functional, but then we have to also look at what do we do when we need to change those people back? So is it fair that only half, and I use the word fair, but is it fair that half of the group or the team sits within the organization and the other half goes home? The people who are sent home feel isolated, and the people here feel like they would also like a chance to go home. And so when do you start changing that up and cycling them back through, or do you? Because as a healthcare organization, we're an essential service, and we experienced immediate changes in our organization last January. They came in the form of safety. We were talking about that earlier before we all joined together. And how do we keep our employees, our physicians, our patients safe at all times in any kind of hybrid workplace or service industry? We didn't get a lot of lead times like no one did. In many cases, we were able to take new information, process it, build some guidelines and implement. But I think one of the skills that we all learned throughout our organization, and most organizations, are that we became nimbler. We became a tighter leadership team. We needed to be cohesive, and we needed to get it right. We paid attention to every government and health organization update. And as you see, still today, those come quite frequently with little time between the changes from one guideline and protocol to the next. We had to absorb that, make changes, implement, get it out to our employees, our physicians, and even patients to make sure everyone understood how we were taking their safety as number one. We have also recently begun to conduct some de-escalation training for our employees and physicians to help them navigate situations they face every day. We all hear on the news that people can be argumentative for having to wear a mask or not being able to take their support person in or being able to visit someone that's in the hospital. That is quite frustrating for most people in the community. And sometimes those situations come into our workplace. And so we have newer escalated issues that we need to deal with. And so from a protection of our people, we want to make sure that they are fully trained on how to de-escalate that and be able to continue to provide good health care. Like all companies, we examined, and we're going to continue to examine remote applications for work. Recruitment and onboarding, we still do most of that here in person. It's just who we are. If you're going to work in our clinic, you need to be able to come in for a physical interview so that you understand some of the parameters and PPE requirements, and we can talk about that face-to-face. We have been working closely with our IT, marketing, operations teams to really enhance that feeling of connectivity, both emotionally and technologically, because some of the people who are going home are feeling more isolated, like I said previously. And so we're connected, but maybe just technologically. And so we need to get better at making sure the culture is connected as well. With the increase of technology and automation, we have been able to recruit from some universities. And as you all know, universities are still teaching people online. So how do we get into a classroom? We used to come do class visits. Can't do that anymore unless I want to show up on a Teams video. So we decided to hold a classroom visit through Teams. We also had an online career fair where we interviewed candidates around the world on web-based interviews. It worked great. We never would have tried it before. We thought that that was a barrier for us, and it really wasn't. And so I think if 2020 taught us anything, it's we need to be better able or positioned to assist our employees in feeling connected to the team in the workplace. And I think for us, that even includes new recruit or possible new candidates.
Thank you, Sherry. I think, I love to hear that challenges have been converted to opportunities. So I think that's fantastic. So thank you, Debbie and Sherry. So we're going to go to our next polling question. So our third question is, sorry, just lost my note there. One of the HR challenges that continues to gain traction that we've mentioned several times is what does the office of the future look like? Remote work, hybrid work versus employee relocation or back in the office? And how does that impact the organization and the overall compensation? So I'll give everyone a few seconds to provide what your opinion is and what the future of work is going to look like for you and what you would like to see it look like. Let's give it another second. And well, there it is. Overwhelmingly, 83% is the hybrid solution. And I think many organizations are working on what that solution is going to look like. So I'm going to move it over to our panelists and look at what it is that you're expecting in terms of the workplace in the future, and overall, do you feel that compensation may be adjusted based on what solution you move forward with? So I'm going to go to you, Evelyn, first.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a topic near and dear to my heart, and I kind of have to grin to see that the majority of the panels and the participants would love to work hybrid. Because if it is hybrid, there is no relocation required, which it's easier. So let's talk a bit about how Pembina sees it and then what I see in the industry. So Pemina really is still a real close group that would love to go back 5 days a week. So they really wouldn't like to see people working permanently remote. However, having said that, when COVID hit, we actually were forced to mature very quickly. So Pemina, fortunately, we just started with our equipment working, being able to work with teams, having video conferences. We learned really quick. But the downside is that we don't really have a solid approach yet on long-term working from home, particularly after the pandemic hopefully subsides. And so there's lots of questions in that area. What do we do long-term? Because as we get closer to hopefully some solutions, we have been hearing comments from employees, not only on the hybrid, but in particularly about, I want to work from Ontario. I want to work from my cabin in BC. And while my office is in Calgary, is that okay? So between March and now, we've actually been quite flexible, especially when there was a new call that we cannot go back to the office. There was no other way. People can work remote. And as long as it's in Canada, we are okay with it. There is taxation issues, but it's not as difficult as individuals that actually asked, I need to visit my family in Turkey. Can I work remote? We actually had to decline that. And I'll share with the team why. And then I'll get to the employee compensation piece of this. If you are to work remote outside of Canada or even your province, there are taxation consequences. And so, for example, we had several individuals that wanted to work from Mexico. Other individuals, they wanted to travel to their family in Turkey. The challenge is if you work remote, but your working location is in one of those countries, they have different requirements and rights. And you can think about vacation entitlements, social assistance, working hours, termination requirements. So it is not as easy as saying, sure, work ahead. You need to really ensure that you have your legal department involved, the HR department, and really look at the consequences. The biggest one for Pembina not to allow people to work outside of Canada was that it might actually create a permanent establishment abroad. So all of those are major consequences. And for an individual, they think, well, I'm doing my work. It doesn't matter. I can deal with the time changes. I just want that flexibility. And we appreciate that. But there are long-term consequences if you are not having those conversations. There's personal taxation, there's policy considerations, then there's immigration requirements. And let's not talk about health and safety. And lastly, data transfers if you are in certain countries and you're emailing back and forth with your company. So all of that actually for us prevented at the moment to say we are not able to allow outside of Canada. Inside of Canada, we've kind of allowed it, exceptional cases, but it is okay as long as you do your job and you work virtually and you let us know where you are. The challenges that we see, there's still the trend that flexibility is key rather than the payments. But what we are now taking as a consideration is after the pandemic decides, what is the reality going to look like? If an individual is living with their family in Ontario, for example, because it is useful for child support, they were quite remote during the COVID times, will you force them back? Or will you say, if it is a role that can be done remotely, will we allow that? So we're actually right in the middle of those discussions. I can't really indicate where Pembina is going, but those are discussions to have. What we're looking at from an HR perspective is we need to be very clear on what our boundaries are. There are some essential roles, operational roles, for example, where you have to be in the plant, you have to work your shift. That is not a possibility to work remote. But what do you do, for example, with a payroll administrator who actually can do a better job working remote than being interrupted in the office? Will you force them back? Or can you set boundaries around, we want to see you face-to-face at least once a quarter? Who's going to pay for travel expenses? What are the commitments to travel? And also going forward, when we are going to hire people, will we allow people to work remotely? At the moment, our company still prefers to have them close to the corporate offices because we really believe that there is so much collaboration face-to-face. That's where we want to go back. But I really believe, and that's what we see in the industry, and that's what we keep on challenging our own company, I see a trend that employees really expect more flexibility. So happy to see hybrid, but hybrid, what does it look like? Does it look like that you can actually work remote and once a quarter you come in, or is it 2 days a week from home? If that's the case, then it makes life easier in a way, because you can actually work, but you're still in the vicinity of your offices. But I believe that there is going to be a trend, especially for people that are maybe near retirement age, where they decide to look at phase two and what does it look like? Do you want to work in a warmer location? Will the company allow you that flexibility? If not, will you basically decide to quit and find a company that allows you to do that? So to me, looking at the content and looking at the opportunities here, I think flexibility and really thinking about what is important for the employee is probably more important than payments and compensation for it. But it is too early to tell. I really think that in the longer term, people will want to have flexibility. And if the current employer is not providing it, suddenly the boundaries are gone. You don't have to look for a job in Calgary if you're based in Calgary. There are more and more opportunities where you can work remotely if you commit to working in certain time locations, so that you know when you're on, you know that you're responsive, and you can deliver remotely. So I think that is the biggest changer. Don't really think the money is the biggest issue. It is the flexibility. I think I'll leave it at that, Trina, but it's a topic I can talk forever, and I see it evolving, and I'm actually quite excited to see, because suddenly our talent pool is not limited to Alberta anymore. It actually is going to be global.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And we're certainly seeing that happen a great deal across Canada, actually, where the options are growing. And I certainly would be happy to live someplace nice and warm during the winter season in Calgary for sure. So I'm going to pass it on to Debbie from there.
Thanks, Trina. Thanks, Evelyn. That's great information. We're in a similar situation as your company going into this, and even through the summer. The executive felt that we should be a working from office environment once the pandemic was done, and that has shifted. So. Overall, I think as Evelyn said, in terms of each organization, you have to look at your business model, your demographic types of employees, and there's no really one size fits all solution. Again, in that same article from McLean and Company, they basically polled people, and it showed that 9 out of 10 organizations are planning on implementing some kind of working from home in 2021. So I found that really interesting. So we're taking a bit of a different approach, though, from you, as the bulk of our organization is comprised of frontline employees working with our tenants and in our buildings. We don't have a lot of pressure from them to work from home. Our pressure comes from corporate employees, though, which is similar. And that corporate group is working remotely now and providing feedback. They definitely want some flexibility. So given that, and given our experience in the summer, we are shifting, and we're now certainly considering a hybrid work environment. I have to confess, we haven't settled on what that looks like yet. We've got lots of considerations I'll go through with you. And it's a very interesting topic for us to sort through. So we kind of think of what would drive our approach. Our culture is, I think, again, somewhat similar to Evelyn's, a small corporate environment plus our larger company. It's very informal. The leaders are close to their employees. That's one advantage of being a small organization. Leaders are used to physically stopping by, chatting, etc. And so that's a good part of our culture and a positive part of our culture. So we don't want to lose that. And overall, we have a friendly, informal culture. So kind of how do we retain that? And what we're looking at is hybrid in the way of most the corporate employees only. And they would come in and be allowed 1 to 2 days a week working from home. So the bulk of the time in the office, and then 1 to 2 days from home. And as Evelyn mentioned, that's easier in a lot of ways. We avoid the tax issues any impacts to compensation. However, the risk is, as Evelyn said, I agree that employees will be, corporate type employees will be looking for more flexibility. And so our risk is either losing or not being able to attract some employees and talent from more remote locations. So we have to watch that. The benefits are, again, we retain, you know, people are physically together. Our policies will need to reflect reflect how we want people to work. And again, I confess, haven't fully thought through that yet, but the considerations are, should we develop principles where employees are in the office on days that they have meetings, there's team building, where there's opportunities for everyone to physically get together, and then reserve the 1 to 2 days working from home to focus more on those days where it's more individual work, project work, and not a lot of teamwork. And if we're able to do that successfully, we're able to avoid the biggest issue we found in the summer, which was, you know, frankly, everybody was either at their desk or their office on Teams all day long and not even interacting with the other people, because half the workforce is in the other half of your team is at home. And so we quickly realized that really did nothing for building teams and physical interaction. So definitely lots to consider, but we are, again, leaning towards the 1 to 2 day from home, and that, again, no tax and no comp implications. Thank you.
Certainly lots of things to consider going forward, and certainly tax implications is just one of them for sure. So thank you, Evelyn and Debbie. We're going to move to our next polling question. And so we're moving into our final topic for today. And how is HR uniquely positioned to assist organizational leadership in supporting employee mental health and well-being? It's certainly a big topic of conversation. And during COVID and beyond, we would like to hear from our audience with our final poll question. So the question is, which of the following could your organization offer to best support employee mental health and well-being? So there's 6 options there: sabbatical, additional holidays, flexible work schedule, increased compensation, employee EAP, and free wellness initiatives. So please choose the one that you feel would serve your employees best. This certainly is a bigger topic of conversation today, with employers supporting employee mental health more than before. And certainly gone are the days where the expectations of leaving home at home and work at work are gone. I think partially because both are combined today, but it definitely has changed the overall perspective of employee mental health. And here we go. Flexible work schedule is by far the top thing that organizations can do to support employee mental health, followed at free wellness initiatives at 23%. So thank you for that. It's interesting to see, you know, certainly some of the trends, and there's certainly no question that employee mental health has been impacted during this time. And how can HR assist organizations in providing support for their employees? So Sherry, I'm going to go to you for this question.
Sure. Thank you. Let's face it, uncertainty can paralyze anyone. We're all feeling this right now. I could probably talk about this for 4 hours, so being mindful of the time, I won't do that. It's daunting for all of us, feeling and not knowing what the future holds and what measures to take to sustain organizational operations. It's a huge challenge. We've all been affected by this uncertainty. It's all around us. It's at work. It's at home. We've talked about those hybrid locations and everything in between. Our employees are affected mentally, not knowing what the future holds for them. Sometimes their spouse, their family members, their children, and HR teams are struggling to put everything packaged up for those employees, all in alignment, while we are also employees feeling the strain and the stress, trying to manage and struggle to hold our own alignment together so that we can properly support the needs of the business and our employees. I think you'd all agree, stress and anxiety and other mental health issues, they've always been there, but the sudden and extended changes have brought issues to the surface in an astounding way. We were talking earlier, can you believe it's been a year already? Like, I'm still waiting for summer of last year. With employees becoming more isolated or remote, our communication routes have been significantly compromised. That's leaving managers unaware at times of their employees' well-being. How do they reach out? What's a convenient time to talk to the employee? They're at home, I'm at home. I can't just drop by and check on them and see how they're doing in a casual way. There's no management by walking around right now. It's management by teams. It now has to be focused. We have to schedule times. And then sometimes employees can put on the employee face and tell us that they're fine when they're really not. So we need to find a way that we can have conversations with them and support with them so it doesn't feel like an intrusion. And so it's not always awkward, because if it is, more or less senior seasoned managers just might not do it. And so that causes stress on both sides of the relationship and potentially further feelings of employee isolation, which we have to be cautious of. We have to learn to balance technology against our emotional intelligence. As HR professionals, we're experienced at being the trusted advisor for the leadership of the organization, but here's our true opportunity to help shape and develop the tools available to our organizations to properly support employees outside of the traditional EFAP. EFAP is fantastic, but there's other things that you can use to build on. In our organization, we needed to balance the needs of the employees in more than that traditional active, inactive status. We had active healthcare employees in the workplace, how they would say, in the face of COVID, during the world's worst pandemic in over a century. That hurts your brain to try to figure out, how do I support these employees? We have people who are working from home. We have those that experienced a layoff, but also came back. We have those that were not able to return to work because they had school-aged children and the schools were closed, or they were health compromised and they couldn't come to work. So they needed accommodations. They had elder care. And the people that were transitioning back and forth between all of those groups, how did we support them? So what we did is we took a look at what each group needed. What were their stressors? Where were they coming from? And what did they need from us outside of that traditional EAP? So we built them a wellness toolbox. We put it on the employee portal. And just from a large, big bucket perspective, we bucketed the information into COVID fact sheets. They're everywhere. The government puts them out, AHS puts them out. We gathered them as they came out, we updated them. Any mental health preparedness links that we could find, coping and connection for children and family, practical and emotional preparedness, including self-isolation tips, because when someone tells you to self-isolate, you think you know, but then when you're ordered to do it, you feel lost. How to take care of yourself. You can't leave your house. You're working from home. Now what do you do? We provided online counseling support, tips on how to speak to our children. Kids are in a tough spot right now. All of a sudden their school stopped, their life changed, which meant our life changed as their parents and also the workers. And so there was a lot of other things swirling in the background for people. Tips on how to speak to our kids about COVID and isolation, and when do they get to see their kids or their other friends. Domestic violence information. As we know, domestic violence is on the increase during COVID, which is quite dangerous. And those with family members in long-term care facilities, we wanted to provide things for them. So we really drilled down through what types of tools and tips people would need. We gave them a lot of financial resources for EI, subsidy programs, government financial supports. Did we need to do that? No, but we know that they're stressed and there's so much information that was out there. No one has time to figure out where it is. They're just trying to find one common point so that they can, at that 1 minute that they decide that they're going to reach out to get help, I want them to have one place where they can go, whether they're laid off, at home, or at work. They can always access it. And And we have found that it's been great for providing tools for managing stress and anxiety, helping people with mental health self-assessment tools. I can sit at my desk and do a self-assessment tool. It will remind me in 3 weeks to do it again, and I can actually see if I'm getting better or if I'm not, and I can take it to my physician if I feel like there's a concern that I need to talk about. And also information on burnout. We have employees that are taking care of patients who are also quite ill. They have caregiver fatigue. They have caregiver fatigue for their own families and for their communities. And so we need to take care of them. And we also provided them with various crisis hotline numbers, one location, on one button for easy access. So I think the more we're open to understanding what various employees encounter as we navigate all of our changing environments, the better poised we are to offer those resources that guide and support our employees to stronger mental wellness.
Thank you, Sherry. It sounds like you've provided a lot of great guidance to your employees, which is fantastic. Robin, we're getting close to the end of our time, so we've got about 2 minutes. Anything you would like to add to that?
I think Sherry covered that really nicely. The only thing that I will add to that is that if you're not already talking about mental health, this is the time to do it. I'm also a huge advocate of mental health personally and professionally. So if you find that you or your organization is hesitant to step into this space, I think it means that you have a great opportunity to contribute to additional work in this area and some stigma busting. And Trina, you said this as well, we have to recognize that people bring their whole selves to work. So this idea of separating yourselves or keeping work at work and home at home, those things I think are outdated. So our role in HR is fundamentally to support the organization and its people. And there's lots of ways that we can do that when it comes to mental health. Talk about it, share resources, provide education, incorporate into your benefits plan, look at policies and processes from that perspective, determine what old ideas we're holding on to that don't facilitate supporting people, and what they need to do to bring their best selves to work.
Thank you, Robin. And yes, certainly, you know, the whole self at work is a newer perspective for many organizations, but I think one that's so important. Well, this brings us to the end of our time, and I do see we have some questions, and I am sorry that we're not going to get to them. However, when we do send out the link to the video, we will provide as much information as we can on the questions that are in the chat. So I thank you for adding those. And before we sign off, I again want to thank all of our panelists for their collaboration and their time today. I'm certain that they have provided each of you with some additional thoughts to help your own journey. I could have spent the whole afternoon chatting with these ladies. They're a wealth of knowledge. And so certainly thank you for taking your time out of your day to join us for this event. And if you would like to see more of these, please communicate with either myself, which my contact is and information is on the screen, or certainly your Robert Half contact. Take care, everyone, and have a fantastic day.